Welcome to CM481, module number 7. Today what we're going to be talking about is negotiations. And I get really excited about this because I think in a lot of other classes this isn't talked about. It's one of those elephants in the room that nobody really wants to talk about because sometimes it's a little messy. Sometimes negotiations aren't the easiest thing to have or to talk about or to figure out how to perform or do negotiations. But it's so important that you leave this program with some tools for negotiation, because what we do in construction management is almost 90% negotiations. Things you're going to be doing on a daily basis require negotiation. At the heart of what you do as a construction manager is problem solving. And problem solving requires great negotiation skills. Take, for example, if you had a problem on the job site with a constructability issue. A couple of things weren't going together correctly and you had to solve that problem. Okay? Those are problems we solve almost daily on a construction site. Well, what that requires is that you, as the construction manager, meet with the subcontractor, negotiate with him what's going to be the most cost-effective and easy solution to the problem, figure out what that is, negotiate with him over a change order cost of what's a fair and reasonable change order. Now take that to the architect, negotiate with the architect to make sure that they know what is fair and reasonable, and then take that to the owner and negotiate with them so that change order can be put into place, so that subcontractor can do the work and the problem is solved. But in that problem solving method, you had to negotiate with multiple people: the subcontractor, the architect, the owner. You might have to negotiate internally with your own group. There's going to be lots and lots of negotiations. The heart of problem solving is negotiation. So teaching you how to problem solve without teaching you how to negotiate is like leaving you hanging. So it's really, really important that we learn how to negotiate. And so that's what I'm going to try to help you with today. That's what I'm going to try to walk you through, because I've got some really good ideas for you and some pointers for you that can help you throughout your careers. Negotiation is important. Now, I like this little cartoon here. So you can see what this says. It says, I want a 5% rebate. Well, I learned in my negotiating class that I should never give the other party everything that they want. Rather, I should meet them in the middle. I'll give you 2.5% rebate. I meant I want a 10%. In that case, I'll give you 5%. Deal. All right. What I want you to learn from this is, don't take everything from this negotiation lecture and say, well, if I apply that to every situation, it's going to work out. Don't use what I'm telling you that literally. Make sure that you understand that every negotiation is different. There's not going to be one rule and one method that works in every negotiation. Every negotiation is going to be different because your relationship with every person that you're negotiating with is different. The way you might negotiate with a significant other is different than the way you might negotiate with a car salesman. Okay? Now, I want to talk to you about this. Everybody says, well, we always want a win-win negotiation. Win-win negotiation. There's commercials on TV. Win-win negotiation. Win-win. Well, that's great, but that's not always how it works. What I want to encourage you to do is either go for a win-win negotiation or a lose-lose negotiation. The point here is equality. We cannot always walk out of the room winning negotiations. And you might say, well, why can't we do that? Rob, that seems like a great idea. Well, What happens if we always win against the owner? Well, the owner's not going to be all that happy with us and may not give us more work. What happens if we always win against the architect? Well, the architect is not going to deal with us very well when it comes to other things on the job site, like, well, your submittals are late. Oh, sorry about that. Architects can become hard to work with if you're just playing hardball with them. It's about equality. You may not always leave the room as a winner, but you should leave the room feeling equal. Okay? So what I mean by that is there should be a little bit of give and take. Now, you both might end up here at the win if you can find a way to do that, but you also might end up here, down here, in the lose-lose category, but there's still equality. Like, well, this wasn't our fault, and it wasn't our fault. We're both going to take a hit on it. It doesn't feel good, but at least there's some equality in it. So always strive for either that win-win or lose-lose, but just remember that it's equality that really matters. So problem solving on job sites is critical. But why is it so critical on construction sites? Well, there's a lot of things about construction that make it so that we have to negotiate a lot. For one, not everything on the job is going to be defined in the construction documents. There's just no way to make that happen. And so we are going to have things that aren't defined within that piece of paper, and so we have to figure out a way to make it happen anyways. So if there is a constructability problem, we have to negotiate that. We have to negotiate with the owners, the architects, the subcontractors. We have to negotiate those things to make that happen, because it's not all going to be defined on the project documents. Also, communication needs to happen between all parties on the construction team. Now, we have so many different people that are coming together to make the construction process happen. All the ones I've mentioned already: subcontractors, architects, owners, general contractors, for one, the basic ones. But then we have all of our suppliers that we have to deal with. We have all the fabricators of the materials that we have to deal with. There might be multiple owners on a project. I was on a project that had 3 or 4 different owners that we had to deal with because they all had a different piece of the pie, a piece of the building. And so you might have multiple owners that you have to deal with. So communication is key. And in that communication, a lot of times there's bad communication. And so you have to be there in the middle to make sure and negotiate those conversations to make sure everybody ends up equally. Win-win, lose-lose, equality. Okay? So you might have to negotiate those conversations. Another thing is, solutions to problems will usually require some sort of compromise by companies. It's not always a black and white situation. When you have problems on a job, it's not going to be, here's the right answer, here's the wrong answer. Oh, let's choose the right answer. That's not always going to be the way it is. A lot of times there's going to be compromise. This company's going to have to give a little bit, this company's going to have to give a little bit, and the GC is going to have to give a little bit, and we'll all come together to make this solution to this problem. So compromise needs to happen. And anytime there's compromise, there's negotiation that has to happen. I met a lady one time, and she was a really interesting person, and I got to talking to her, and I said, hey, what do you do for a living? And she told me that she was a lobbyist. And so that sounded really interesting to me because I'd never met a lobbyist before. And so I got to talking to her a little bit about what that meant and what she did really for a living. And obviously she made a lot of money doing what she was doing for a living. And she said to me that really I get into rooms with people and I negotiate and I talk about things, and I'm always the most prepared person in the room. And so that's why I'm really good at my job, is because I'm more prepared than anybody sitting around that table for whatever argument is going to come up. And so she was a professional negotiator. But what that told me is there's preparation that needs to happen for negotiations. You have to be well prepared for a negotiation. And so what does that mean? Well, going into a negotiation, you should have thought about it. Now, we can't think about all of the negotiations because sometimes we just walk out onto the job site and a negotiation starts to happen. Like, well, do you want to put this wall here right now, or do you want us to move down here? Well, let's talk about that. That's a negotiation. That's a real simple negotiation that is going to happen just on a daily basis out on the job site. You can't really prepare for all of that. But there are some major negotiations that we can prepare for. And so you're going to have an assignment that has to do with preparing for a negotiation. And I want you to listen real closely to each of these things that you should prepare for in the negotiation, because you need to think about those for the particular assignment. There's a list that I want to talk to you about, and the first one is goals. What do you want to get out of the negotiation? Okay, so you're thinking about a negotiation. What are your goals in this particular negotiation? Is it the project price? Is it the terms of the negotiation? Is it a contract duration that you're trying to get out of it? A schedule issue? What are you trying to accomplish in this? Sometimes that's easy to answer, and sometimes it's not always easy to answer. The next thing that you need to think about is trades. So what do you and the other person have that can be traded? Okay, so that might be skills, that might be money, that might be time, that might be even future work. But it's a trade. So you need to think about what the trade is going to be, if there is going to be a trade, and if you even have anything to trade. Maybe you don't. It's about that win-win, lose-lose negotiation. Okay? So are you going to be able to trade something? Now, alternatives. You need to think about alternatives. If you don't reach an agreement, what alternatives do you have? So let's say that you and this other company are in a negotiation. What is the alternative if you don't reach a meeting point? So that might be, well, if we don't reach a meeting point, we're going to go to arbitration, mediation, maybe legal, maybe go to court. That might be the alternative. Hopefully it's not, but to some negotiations, that is the alternative. But what is the alternative? Does it even really matter if you reach, a meeting point on this one, a compromise? You need to think about that, because if you're fighting tooth and nail in a negotiation for a compromise that doesn't even really matter, is that worth it? Okay? Choose your battles. You've heard that before. Now, the next thing on the list is you need to think about the relationship that you have with this company. What is the history of your relationship with this company or with this person? So you're going to treat a negotiation differently if it's a subcontractor that you've been working with a really long time and they got a great history with you and they do most of your work and they do a really good job, versus one that you've had problems with throughout the whole project and you don't even want to work with them anymore. You're just trying to finish this job and you're probably never going to do business with them again. Those are going to be two separate types of negotiations based on relationships. What's your future relationship with this person look like? Maybe you just met them, but you know that a relationship with this person could be beneficial or could be meaningful. How are you going to negotiate it based on that future relationship that you want? And I'll encourage you right now, I'll say 9 times out of 10, we should be very concerned about our relationship with people because we are in a relationship-based business. No matter what you think about that person or that company, chances are you're going to do business with them again. So keep that in mind. We are in a relationship-based business. You will probably see those people again. The next thing you need to think about is expected outcomes. What outcomes will people be expecting from this negotiation? So, first of all, analyze what you're going to be expecting. Okay, what do you expect out of this negotiation? Like above all this other stuff, what are your expectations? But also, what do you think the expectations of the other group coming out of this negotiation are? And what are the expectations of outside parties? Maybe that's your boss. What is the expectation of your boss of the results of this negotiation? Be thinking about that because that weighs on it. That weighs on how you're going to negotiate and what you're going to negotiate. The next thing is the consequences. What happens if you win or lose? Okay, so what happens if you win or lose this negotiation? And remember, we want equality, but what happens if we both end up in a win-win or lose-lose? The good and the bad. You need to know what the consequences are before you go too far. If the consequences of you losing this negotiation are the company going under and the company's out and you're out of a job, then that negotiation is a lot more important than if the consequences are you lose, 0.5% of your profit on the job, but you're still fine. Okay, so think about the consequences. Write down the consequences. The next thing to think about is who has the power in the negotiation? Who has what power in the relationship? A lot of times, it seems like the owner has a lot of power in a project because they ultimately have all the money. Sometimes it seems like the GC has the power because they in turn have the money to pay the subcontractors. But then you got to think about the power that is with the subcontractors, because if they back out of a project because of whatever, or don't do things the way you want them done, this can negatively affect you as the general contractor. So who holds that power with the labor and the skills and the time frame? The subcontractor holds that power. So analyze the power situation in the negotiation. And then finally, and this is after you've thought about all these other things, you need to think about possible solutions. So many people jump to possible solutions right away without thinking of all these other things that could play a role in it. Now, by possible solutions, that's compromises. Do compromises exist? Is there a compromise with this? Do you even have any money left in your budget to be able to split something with them? Well, do you? I don't know. You're going to have to look at that. So you should probably look at that before you ever get started with the negotiation, because you need to know what a possible solution is. You need to have multiple possible solutions so that you can have those in your back pocket while you're negotiating, not to pull out right away and throw on the table, but know what they are. Because if one doesn't work, maybe another one will. But know your possible solutions. After you put all of this together, then you're ready for a major negotiation. If you haven't thought about some of these things, they may come to you halfway through a negotiation and you realize you really messed up, and that you can't do that possible solution because of this, or you're ruining this relationship because you hadn't even thought about the fact that it hurt relationships when you win or lose negotiations. You didn't even know what the trades were, and so when a subcontractor presented you with an option, you hadn't thought about it. and all of a sudden you have to say, well, I've got to go to my boss and talk to him about that. Instead of having done it already, and then you have a problem that doesn't have a solution yet until you go off and do something else. You want to come out of that negotiation with a solution ultimately. So be prepared. Be prepared for negotiations, and you will do so much better in negotiations. Next, I want to talk to you about negotiation style, because I think that in some classes they stop short of giving you tools that you can use in negotiation. They say negotiation's important, you're going to have negotiations, but they don't actually give you any tools that you can use. And I want to leave you today with tools that you can use in negotiation. So you've already prepared for your negotiation. You've done all of the background work, and you understand what this negotiation means for you, for your company, for the other person involved. Well, style is really important when it comes to negotiation. The way that you hold yourself, the way that you carry yourself, the style that you use is unique to you. But it's important that you do have style and that you do have some class in what you do. Now, emotional displays during negotiations are usually inappropriate. Okay? So, bringing on the tears so that you can, show them how much it means to you, not necessarily a great negotiation tool. I know some people say you can get out of tickets with the cops by breaking out the tears, but every time I've started crying in front of a police officer, I've never gotten out of the tickets. I don't know, it's weird. But style is important. Emotional displays are considered inappropriate, but at the same time we have to consider other people's emotions. I've been in negotiations where people have lost their mind, like absolutely just yelling, throwing, cussing. It was ugly and awful. Negotiation totally broke down, did not solve anything. Maybe it made that person feel better, I don't know. I think that person probably went home and said, man, I can't believe I did that, and had this burden on them. But losing control of yourself during a negotiation is not an acceptable form of negotiation, and it creates a barrier that has negotiations breaking down usually. Okay? Now, it is important that we understand, though, how people are feeling, and to be empathetic to how people are feeling in a negotiation. If a subcontractor comes to you and says, I've really screwed up, I poured this whole thing wrong with the wrong concrete, and it all needs to be ripped out. That's $100,000 worth of concrete. Our company will absolutely, be done for if this happens. It's important to understand where that person is, where that company is, to be empathetic to their situation. But emotional displays, if he comes in and he's just crying, like literally crying on your shoulder, that is not appropriate. But understand empathy. Now here's where the rubber really meets the road in negotiation. You'll find so many negotiation tactics, so many things you can learn on the internet, but I want to give you today a real simple way to think about negotiation when you're in the middle of negotiation, because I can't remember the 15 points of negotiation when I'm in a negotiation, but can I remember 4? I can remember 4. You can remember 4. I know you can. I believe in you. And so today I'm going to give you 4 points of negotiation. Now, these came from somebody who was one of the best negotiators I know. He could negotiate pretty much anything in construction, and usually everybody came out on top, including the person he was negotiating with. And so I asked him one time, I said, okay, break this down for me. I'm going to go teach this class, break it down for me. What is your points of negotiation? How do you negotiate? And these were the 4 points that he gave me. Now, this is a guy that's been president of multiple companies, vice president of multiple companies, retired multiple times because he was just very, very successful. So he's the kind of guy that you should listen to. And he said, Rob, first things first. Number one, before you give anything, explain why you hold your point of view. If somebody asks you for something, explain why you hold that point of view. Don't just say, oh, okay, here, have that. Because if somebody's asking you maybe to cut your number, explain to them why your number is the way it is. To do that, you need to have done some research before you started or know your number. So explain why you hold your point of view. Don't just give, because if you just give, then they think that you've already upcharged it already. You already have so much profit in it, you can just start giving it away, and they're like, wait a second, maybe I should ask for more. But explain why you hold your point of view. Number two, compromise. Never give something without getting or changing something in return. Remember that whole win-win or lose-lose equality thing? If you're going to give something, get something in return. So if it is somebody, talking about your number for a certain scope of work, say, well, I can give you some money off of that, but here's the thing you're going to have to give me. I can take some money off, but you've got to buy that material so that there's no markup on it. Something to that effect. And then number three, explain the considerations and consequences if they do that. So you can buy that, but that means you have to get it here on time. You have to track it. You have to make sure that when it arrives on the site, somebody offloads it and gets it into the place and takes it up to the floor where it's going to be used and going to be installed. Here's the consequences if you want to save that money. And then the fourth thing is ultimately reinforce their good decision. Make sure that when they go home at night, they're not saying, man, I can't believe that guy took advantage of me like that. It sounded so good at the time, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it wasn't so good. I'm going to call him up tomorrow, and we're going to talk about this some more. Reinforce their good decision, and make them feel good about their decision. And this doesn't have to be something that's really difficult or weird. You can start by saying, my goal here has always been to have a good relationship with you and your company. My goal in this negotiation was to make sure that we continue that positive relationship between our companies. I really hope that through this negotiation we've come to a point where we both agree and that we both feel like we're equally winning in this situation. Something simple like that, so that they know that you care. So they know that you're not just trying to take advantage of them for an extra buck. It's really important to reinforce their good decisions. So first thing, before giving, explain why you hold your point of view. Number two, compromise, but never give something without getting something in return. Changing something in return. Number three, explain considerations or consequences. And number four, reinforce their good decision. 4 very simple things that you can remember while negotiating with just about anyone. Hey, Jim Bob, come on over here for a second. Oh, hey, Mr. GC. Hey, how's it going? You want to talk to me about something? Jim Bob, I've really been wanting to talk to you about that shirt. I think that's a woman's shirt. It's just low cut. That's the way they're making them these days. And your hard hat? I think you're wearing it backwards. I'm just saying. My hard hat's on backwards? No. brim goes towards the back. Don't you know? Okay, Jim Bob. Just wanted to talk to you real quick. I've been looking over your numbers for landscaping, and I saw in there the mulch. The mulch is crazy high. Kind of seems like a little bit of price gouging on that one. Like I don't know. Not sure if maybe you could sharpen your pencil a little bit on that one. Well, you see, boss, that mulch, it comes from Brazil. They got to cut down some rainforest to get that mulch, and it's treated with a special weed agent. And that weed agent, they got to get that from a place in Europe. Europe. That's a long ways away, you see. And so they get that stuff from Europe and they put it on this Brazilian rainforest mulch. And then when you bring it to the site, you got to cover it, because if it gets too wet and it's still stacked up, then it's going to start getting all moldy and it's rotten and it ain't going to be good. Well, I understand that, but still it seems high. I mean, is there anything that we can do that could help you out on that? Is there something we could do to get that number down? Well, let's see. If that's the case, then maybe you want to supply the mulch yourself. That we'll just take it out of our contract and you can supply that. But here's the deal. If you supply the mulch, you're going to have to make sure that it gets delivered on time and that you get it off the truck and into a stockpile. And you might have to move it into like littler stockpiles so that you can get it covered so that it doesn't get wet, because you don't want to get all that moldy stuff in it, because then it's no good at all. And that weed agent from Europe, it just doesn't work at that point. And so, it really is not very easy to deal with. But if you want to provide the mulch, then be my guest. Well, in that case, I don't think I really want to take that on. And I see where you're coming from. Let's just keep the contract the way it is right now and not worry about us providing that. I really want you guys to provide that. I think you'll be the best for it, and you'll be able to get it unloaded and everything else. So, I appreciate you having this conversation with me here today and making me feel better about the number. Well, I think you made a really good decision here today, and don't worry, I'll buy you one of these fancy low V-cut things. That's all the kids are wearing these days. It's pretty cool. And one of these fancy backwards hard hats that you can use for yourself. That'll be real good. Have a great day. Thanks, Jim Bob. All the kids are doing it, huh? And last but not least, I want to talk to you about labels. Now, this comes from a retired FBI hostage negotiator, and his name was Chris Voss. And he talked about how when you're in the middle of a negotiation, information is valuable. Information is gold, and ultimately you want the information to flow from the person that you're talking to. The more information that you have, the better argument you can make, the better solution you can come up with. But you need to understand what that information is. You need to be able to get that information from people. And so he says that the number one negotiating tool for getting that information is not always asking questions. So you would think, well, I want some information, I'm going to ask him for that information. Ask questions, ask questions. I've always been told just to ask questions. And that's good, but asking questions is not always the best way to get information. Use labels. Now, what do I mean by labels? Labels are, you're trying to define something. You're trying to define some feeling. You're trying to define what somebody's thinking, but you define that for them in what you say. So when you do this, there's some simple things you can remember. You need to remember seems like. Okay? Always start that sentence with it seems like. So it seems like you're whatever. Or it sounds like. It sounds like what you're saying to me is this. Or it looks like. It looks like what you're doing is this. Or it feels like. This is where we can actually talk about feelings here, okay? It feels like you're trying to do this. Am I correct? So apply a label to what they're doing, and you can use this in such a great way to release information from them. And so when you say something like that, it seems like you're doing this. The natural response to that is either, well, I kind of am, yeah, or yes, I am, or no, I'm not doing that at all. Let me tell you what I'm doing. And then they go on and tell you what they're doing. Or it looks like this is what you're doing over there. The natural response to that is they're going to tell you what they're doing over there, whether it is or is not what they're doing. It feels like you're trying to do this to me. Oh, no, I'm not trying to do that to you. I'm just talking. I'm just talking here. Let me explain to you what I'm doing. It's going to create an entry door for them to just give information. Most types of people respond to labels. It triggers a flow of thoughts from those who you're talking to. So they start thinking. You're triggering their thoughts. Now, if you just ask somebody, hey, what are you thinking? What are you thinking about this? The door is left too wide open, and a lot of times that's a barrier. People think, oh, I don't know, what am I thinking about this? But if you label what they're thinking, it seems like you're thinking this. It sounds like you're thinking this. Then they can respond to that in a positive manner or a negative manner. Now, you can also do this with negative dynamics. Now, I don't like to be negative, but sometimes this works in situations. It seems like you hate this. Or it seems like this is a problem for you. Or it seems like you dislike this. And then all of a sudden, you start to have empathy for them because you're kind of putting yourself into that negative situation with them and trying to understand what they're feeling. Once you can summarize what the person you're negotiating with is feeling or saying, once you can summarize that by placing these labels and hearing the information and getting as much information as possible, after that you can start to make your point because you're going to be able to formulate your point a lot better. So use labels. Practice using labels with whoever you're talking to. Use labels and see how it gains information from people. Whoever you're talking to, try using labels so that you can start to negotiate better.